This is the story of how my 4-year-old daughter sticking her finger in a birthday cake ended with my own mother going to prison. It's the story of how I broke my family apart, piece by painful piece, until the people who hurt us were left begging for mercy. And I gave them none, because sometimes you have to burn bridges to build a safer home. It all started innocently enough, just a regular Saturday morning. I woke up at 6 a.m., got dressed, and headed to my mother's house in Maple Ridge. My daughter, Emma, was still rubbing the sleep from her eyes as I buckled her into her car seat. She clung to her stuffed rabbit and asked if we could get donuts after helping Grandma. I promised her we would, completely oblivious to how drastically our lives were about to shatter. My mother lived in the same modest, 2-story colonial on Birch Street where my sister Diane and I grew up. That white picket fence peeling for years was a perfect symbol of my mom's stubbornness. She refused to let anyone fix it, claiming it gave the place character. I'd learned long ago not to argue with her. Keeping the peace in our family meant swallowing your opinions and nodding along, especially when it came to her. We arrived around 7:30. Mom was already in the kitchen, flour dusting her apron, a frantic energy in the air as she prepared for my niece Madison's 5th birthday party later that afternoon. The scent of vanilla and butter usually brought comfort, but today it felt tense. Emma's eyes, however, lit up the moment we walked through the door. She adored watching her grandmother bake, even though Mom rarely let her help anymore. "Children just make messes," she'd always say, "and I don't have the patience." "You're here," Mom grunted without looking up from her mixing bowl. "Good. I need you to run to the store. I forgot to get the pink frosting Madison specifically requested." I set my purse down on the counter. "Sure, Mom. Let me just get Emma settled first. She can watch cartoons in the living room." Mom's voice was sharp, a typical prelude to her criticism. "Just keep her out of the kitchen while I'm working. That child needs to learn boundaries, Jessica. You let her run wild." Emma tugged at my sleeve, her innocent eyes pleading. "Can I help Grandma bake?" "Not today, sweetie," I said gently, leading her toward the living room. "Grandma's very busy." My mother's voice followed us. "That child needs to learn boundaries, Jessica. You let her run wild." I bit my tongue so hard I almost tasted blood. This was typical behavior from Mom, criticizing my parenting while treating Diane's daughter, Madison, like royalty. Madison could do no wrong in her eyes. Emma, meanwhile, was constantly scrutinized for being too loud, too messy, too energetic. The favoritism had always stung, but I convinced myself kids didn't notice these things. I told myself they were resilient. How terribly, tragically wrong I was. I spent the next hour running errands for the party, the craft store for special candles, the bakery for backup cupcakes, just in case Mom's cake didn't turn out perfect, the party supply store for matching plates and napkins in Madison's favorite shade of purple. By the time I returned, my arms were loaded with bags, and Emma was getting restless. The house smelled incredible, though. Mom had truly outdone herself with a 3-tier cake, decorated with elaborate fondant flowers and delicate sugar butterflies. It stood on the dining room table like a centerpiece at a wedding. I had to admit it was stunning. Mom had always been talented at baking, even if she wielded that talent like a weapon, a way to show up other mothers in the neighborhood. "Wow, Mom, it's beautiful," I said. She wiped her hands on her apron, surveying her work with satisfaction. "Madison deserves the best. Her mother tells me she's been so excited for this party. All her little friends from preschool are coming." I noticed with a familiar pang that she didn't mention Emma being excited too. My daughter was Madison's cousin after all. She'd been talking about the party for weeks. "Where should I put these supplies?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Just leave them on the kitchen counter. I need to finish the last touches on the cake. Then we'll set up the decorations outside. Diane should be here soon with Madison." Emma wandered into the dining room, her rabbit dragging on the floor behind her. She'd been so patient all morning, entertaining herself while I helped with party preparations. Her eyes grew wide when she saw the magnificent cake. "Mommy, look. It's so pretty." "I know, baby, but don't get too close. We want to keep it perfect for Madison's party." Mom came bustling in with a piping bag, adding final decorative touches to the top tier. She was completely focused on her work, tongue pressed between her lips in concentration. I went back to the kitchen to organize the supplies, thinking everything was finally under control. That's when I heard it, Emma's delighted squeal. My heart dropped into my stomach. I rushed back to the dining room just in time to see my daughter running toward the table with the pure joy only a 4-year-old can embody. She was reaching out, her little finger extended, fascinated by the swirls of buttercream frosting. Before I could even open my mouth, before I could scream a warning, she ran her finger right through the side of the bottom tier. Time seemed to freeze. My mother's face went from intense concentration to absolute, unbridled fury in less than a second. The piping bag dropped from her hands, splattering frosting across the hardwood floor. "What a disgusting girl." The words came out like venom, laced with something truly horrifying. I'd never heard my mother use that tone before. Not even when Diane and I were children and broke her favorite lamp playing indoor ball. This was different. This was pure, undiluted hatred. Before I could even process what was happening, Mom lunged forward and grabbed Emma by the shoulders. My daughter's bright smile vanished, replaced by confusion and then sheer terror. Then Mom did something I never thought possible. She slammed Emma's head against the wall. The sickening thud of skull meeting plaster will haunt me forever. That horrifying sound, followed by Emma's small body crumbling. The way her rabbit fell from her hands, forgotten. This is why I didn't want you guys here. Mom was screaming now, her face red and contorted, a grotesque mask of rage. Look what she did. You just ruined my precious granddaughter's cake. Just leave. Get out of my house. I was frozen in shock for maybe 2 seconds, my mind refusing to comprehend. Then maternal instinct kicked in like a lightning bolt, obliterating everything else. I dropped to my knees beside Emma. She was lying motionless on the floor, her eyes closed. A small trickle of blood ran down from her hairline. My hand shook violently as I carefully touched her face. Emma, baby, can you hear me? Nothing. Panic seized my chest, a cold, suffocating grip. I pulled out my phone to call 911, my fingers fumbling. But at that exact moment, the front door opened. Diane walked in with Madison skipping beside her, both of them laughing about something light and carefree. Madison ran straight to the dining room, balloons tied to her wrist bouncing behind her. She stopped dead when she saw the damaged cake and, more importantly, Emma on the floor. What's this? Her innocent question, so full of childlike curiosity, broke whatever last shred of restraint my mother had left. I watched in absolute horror as Mom turned her fury on my unconscious daughter. She drew her foot back and kicked Emma in the ribs. The rage that flooded through me then was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was primal, searing. I scooped Emma into my arms, cradling her head carefully, and stood up. My mother was still yelling something incoherent about the ruined party and ungrateful daughters. Diane stood in the doorway looking utterly confused, unable to process the scene unfolding. I walked past all of them without a word, got Emma into the car, and drove straight to the emergency room. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Emma remained unconscious in the back seat, secured in her car seat at an awkward angle because I'd been too frantic to adjust it properly. I kept talking to her, begging her to wake up, promising her everything would be okay, even though I had no idea if it would be. The ER doctors were incredible. They took Emma back immediately. Tests were run, CT scan, x-rays, a full workup. I sat in that waiting room for 3 agonizing hours, every minute stretching into an eternity, before a doctor finally came out. She delivered the devastating news. Emma had a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and needed 7 stitches for the gash on her head. She would recover, but they wanted to keep her for at least 48 hours given the severity of the head trauma, and to monitor for any complications. When they finally let me see her, Emma was awake but groggy. She looked so small in that hospital bed, and 4 in her tiny arm, monitors beeping around her. She saw me and started crying. Mommy, why did Grandma hurt me? What did I do wrong? My heart didn't just break. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. How do you tell your 4-year-old that her grandmother, the person who was supposed to love her unconditionally, had violently assaulted her over frosting? How do you explain that kind of evil? My phone had been buzzing nonstop. Diane had left multiple voicemails. Mom had called repeatedly. Text messages piled up, each one more demanding than the last. When I finally looked through them hours later, I counted the notifications. Diane had tried reaching me 17 times, Mom 9 times. They wanted to know where I was, why I'd left, whether Emma was faking her injuries for attention. That last text from my mother, suggesting my unconscious child was faking for attention, made my blood boil. I turned off my phone. The doctors kept Emma for observation. I stayed with her both nights, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, my mind racing. On the second evening, a social worker came to speak with me. I told her everything, leaving out no detail. She listened carefully, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. By the time she left, she said she'd be filing a report with Child Protective Services, and that I should absolutely consider pressing charges. I spent that entire night thinking not just about pressing charges, though that was definitely happening. I thought about every instance of favoritism, every casual cruelty, every time Mom had made Emma feel less than. I thought about my own childhood, how I'd always been the disappointing daughter compared to perfect Diane. I thought about the patterns of toxicity I'd normalized because they were all I knew. By the time Emma was discharged from the hospital, I had a plan. A terrifying, liberating plan. First, I called a lawyer. Patrick Henderson came highly recommended for family law cases. He listened to my story and agreed to take my case immediately. That afternoon, we filed for a restraining order against my mother, and I pressed charges for assault and child endangerment. The police were surprisingly supportive once they saw the hospital records and the chilling photos of Emma's injuries. Second, I documented everything. Every text message, every voicemail, every email. I saved it all. Diane had sent increasingly hostile messages blaming me for ruining Madison's party. Mom's messages alternated between fury and self-pity, never once asking about Emma's condition. The sheer, shocking lack of remorse was stunning. Third, and perhaps most crucially, I called my father. My parents had divorced when I was 15. Dad moved to Oregon and started a new life, maintaining minimal contact with us over the years. Mom had always portrayed him as the villain, the man who abandoned his family. I believed her version for years. Now I wondered what the real story was. Jessica. He sounded surprised when he answered. Is everything all right? I told him everything, the raw, ugly truth of that day. There was a long, heavy silence after I finished. Your mother did what? His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Raw with a new kind of fury. That's it. I'm coming out there. Give me 2 days. Dad, you don't have to. Jessica, listen to me. There are things you don't know about your mother. Things I should have told you years ago. I was a coward for leaving you girls with her, and I've regretted it every day since. I'm not making that mistake again. True to his word, Dad arrived 2 days later. He came straight to my apartment where Emma and I had been staying since the hospital. She was healing physically, but the emotional trauma was evident. She flinched at loud noises and had nightmares about Grandma hurting her. Dad brought his new wife Carol, who was a child psychologist. Carol didn't serve as Emma's official therapist. That would have been an ethical conflict. But she helped us find an excellent child trauma specialist named Dr. Miranda Chan, and provided invaluable guidance as a family member who understood the clinical aspects of Emma's recovery. It was the first time in days I'd seen my daughter truly smile. That evening, after Emma went to bed, Dad pulled me aside. We sat at my kitchen table with coffee, and he told me everything. Your mother has always had anger issues, he began, his hand trembling slightly. When we were married, she'd have these explosive episodes, usually over minor things. I was the target back then, but I started noticing she'd snap at you girls too. When you were little, maybe 3 or 4, you spilled juice on the carpet. She grabbed you so hard she left bruises on your arms. I stared at him, stunned. I don't remember that. I know you were so young, but I remember. I took photos, confronted her about it. She broke down crying, swore it would never happen again. Said she was stressed and overwhelmed. I believed her because I wanted to. We even went to counseling, and things got better for a while. He took a deep, shaky sip of coffee. But it happened again and again. Always when she was stressed. Always explosive rage followed by tearful apologies. I documented everything, but I never did anything about it because I was trying to keep the family together. Then one day she turned on me during an argument, threw a plate at my head. It smashed against the wall 6 inches from where Diane was standing. Dad, why didn't you tell us? His eyes welled up with tears. Because your mother threatened to make sure I never saw you girls again if I said anything. She had family money, good lawyers. I was working construction, barely making ends meet. She said she'd paint me as an abusive drunk and take full custody. I was terrified. So I left, paid my child support, and hated myself for being a coward. But I'm not running anymore. We're going to make sure she never hurts Emma or any child again. Dad became my rock through the agonizing legal process. The restraining order was approved within a week. My mother was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Emma and me. She violated it twice in the following month, brazenly showing up at Emma's preschool and later at my workplace. Each violation was meticulously documented and added to her mounting legal troubles. The police took it seriously after the second incident, and she was taken into custody briefly before posting bail. The assault charges moved forward. Mom hired an expensive attorney who tried to paint the incident as an accident, claiming Emma had fallen and hit her head on her own. But the evidence was overwhelming. The hospital photo showed injuries completely consistent with the abuse I described. The ER doctor testified. The social worker testified. Even Diane, my perfect sister, had to admit under oath what she'd witnessed. My sister had tried to defend Mom at first, sending me horrible messages about family loyalty and forgiveness. But as the truth came out, as she was forced to face the reality of what her mother had done to Emma, her messages stopped. She'd always been the golden child, shielded from Mom's darker side. Facing the reality of what happened to Emma finally shook her foundation. The civil lawsuit came next. Patrick helped me file for damages covering Emma's medical bills, therapy costs, and emotional trauma. We included my mother's undeniable pattern of favoritism and emotional abuse as evidence of ongoing harm. During discovery, we obtained damning emails between Mom and Diane discussing how Emma was too wild and needed discipline. The correspondence revealed truly troubling comments about my daughter dating back to when she was just 2 years old, showing a consistent pattern of hostility. Some emails from when Emma was still a toddler referred to her as difficult and attention-seeking. Mom's carefully cultivated, perfect grandmother image crumbled. Her friends from church started abandoning her as details became public. The social circle she valued so highly wanted nothing to do with someone who'd hurt a child. Then something truly unexpected happened. Other family members started reaching out to me. My Aunt Sandra, Mom's younger sister, called one evening. "Jessica, I need to tell you something. Your mother did the same thing to me when we were children. She'd fly into rages and hurt me, then convince our parents I was clumsy. I've lived with the trauma for 50 years. I'm so sorry I didn't warn you." 3 of my cousins, Sandra's daughters, Rachel and Amy, plus our cousin Tom from Dad's side, shared similar stories about witnessing Mom's explosive temper over the years. A horrifying pattern emerged. My mother abusing children when stressed, then manipulating the narrative to avoid consequences. Each person who came forward strengthened our case immeasurably. The criminal trial lasted 3 days. I had to testify, recounting the worst moment of my life in front of a courtroom full of strangers. Emma didn't have to testify because of her age, but her video interview with a forensic specialist was played. Watching my daughter describe her grandmother hurting her, seeing the confusion and pain on her little face, made several jury members openly weep. The prosecution was thorough and relentless. They brought in an expert on child development who explained how Emma's behavior, touching the cake, was completely normal for her age. A neurologist testified about the severity of head trauma in young children, showing CT scan images that made the gallery gasp. The ER doctor who treated Emma walked the jury through every injury in clinical, unflinching detail. Mom's defense attorney tried to paint a picture of a stressed grandmother who'd simply reacted poorly to a ruined cake. He emphasized her age, her spotless record, her decades of community service through the church. He brought character witnesses who testified about her generosity and kindness. But each one crumbled under cross-examination when Patrick asked if they'd ever seen her interact with Emma specifically. Did Mrs. Patterson show the same warmth to both granddaughters? Patrick would ask. The witnesses would hesitate, then admit they'd mostly seen her with Madison. That Emma was often kept separate during family gatherings. The pattern of favoritism, of subtle dismissal, became impossible to ignore. The most damaging testimony came from Emma's preschool teacher, Ms. Rodriguez. She described how, even weeks after the assault, Emma would flinch when other children approached too quickly, how she developed anxiety around older adults. She recounted an incident where Emma had accidentally knocked over paint during art time and immediately burst into tears, begging not to be hurt. "I've taught 4-year-olds for 15 years, Ms. Rodriguez said, her voice steady but clearly emotional. Emma's fear response wasn't normal childhood worry. It was trauma. Someone had taught her that small mistakes resulted in violence. My mother's attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed the testimony as evidence of ongoing harm. I watched Mom's face throughout. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, revealing nothing. During closing arguments, the prosecutor held up a photo of Emma in the hospital. Her small face was bruised, stitches stark against her pale skin, eyes glazed from pain medication. "The defendant wants you to believe this was an accident, that a cake was worth this, that a grandmother who loved her granddaughter could do this in a moment of stress." He paused, letting the jury absorb Emma's fragile image. But the evidence shows premeditation. She grabbed Emma. She slammed her head into the wall with enough force to cause a concussion. And when Emma was already injured and unconscious on the floor, the defendant kicked her in the ribs. That's not an accident. That's assault with intent to harm. The defense's closing argument felt weak in comparison. They leaned heavily on Mom's age and her previously clean record, suggesting this was an isolated incident born from extraordinary stress. But you could see in the jurors' faces that they weren't buying it. My mother showed no emotion throughout. She sat rigid beside her lawyer, occasionally whispering, but never showing an ounce of remorse. Diane attended every day, sitting in the back row. I couldn't read her expression. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman announced, his voice clear and resonant. "Assault, child endangerment, and reckless endangerment." The judge sentenced her to 2 years in prison followed by 5 years probation. She was also ordered to complete anger management courses and undergo a psychological evaluation. The judge's words during sentencing were scathing. "You were in a position of trust. This child loved you, and you betrayed that love in the most violent way possible. You showed no remorse, no accountability. Your actions that day could have killed her. This court has no sympathy for adults who harm children, especially family members who should protect them." Mom's face finally showed emotion, shock, disbelief, pure, unadulterated outrage. The bailiff led her away in handcuffs, and I felt a monumental weight lift from my shoulders. The civil case settled out of court. Mom's insurance company paid a substantial sum that went into a trust fund for Emma's future therapy and education. We also negotiated the permanent surrender of any grandparent visitation rights, which my lawyer said was rare but absolutely warranted given the circumstances. The settlement negotiations were brutal. Mom's insurance company initially tried to lowball us, offering barely enough to cover the immediate medical expenses. Patrick laughed in their faces and presented our extensive documentation. Years of projected therapy costs, educational support Emma might need due to trauma-related learning difficulties, Expert testimony about the long-term psychological impacts of family violence. We had affidavits from 3 child psychologists who reviewed Emma's case. Each one painted a grim picture of potential future struggles, attachment disorders, trust issues, anxiety, depression. The insurance company's own actuaries couldn't argue with the numbers. They came back with a figure that made my eyes water. But money wasn't the real victory. The permanent surrender of grandparent rights was what I'd fought hardest for. In our state, grandparents could petition for visitation even over parental objection. I'd heard horror stories of abusive grandparents using the courts to force contact with grandchildren, traumatizing kids repeatedly under the guise of family connection. Patrick had researched extensively and found a legal precedent where a judge had terminated grandparent rights after documented abuse. We modeled our approach on that case, building an ironclad argument that my mother posed an ongoing danger to Emma's physical and psychological well-being. The insurance company's lawyers initially balked. Surrendering those rights was admitting their client was genuinely dangerous. But faced with the alternative going to trial, where a jury had already found Mom guilty criminally, they relented. Mom had to sign a legally binding document stating she would never seek contact with Emma through any means, including through other family members. Watching her sign that document was surreal. Her hand shook with rage, not remorse. She looked at me across the conference table with such hatred that the mediator actually shifted uncomfortably. I met her gaze steadily, thinking about Emma's broken body on that floor, and felt absolutely nothing but cold, hard satisfaction. Diane finally reached out properly about a month after the sentencing. She asked to meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted. She looked exhausted when I arrived at the cafe. Madison wasn't with her. "I owe you an apology," she said immediately, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to believe what Mom did. It was easier to think you were overreacting or that Emma had somehow provoked her. But I watched the trial. I heard the testimonies. I saw the evidence, and I've been going to therapy. My therapist has helped me understand how Mom manipulated us, how she created this golden child and scapegoat dynamic. I benefited from it, so I never questioned it. I'm disgusted with myself, Jessica. I stood there and watched her kick your daughter, and I did nothing. I was so worried about Madison's party being ruined that I didn't care about Emma bleeding on the floor." Her voice broke completely, tears streaming down her face. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I've cut contact with Mom. I'm not bringing Madison to visit her in prison. I'm working on breaking the cycle so I don't repeat her mistakes with my own daughter." We talked for 2 hours. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. Diane joined a support group for adult children of abusive parents. She began her own therapy journey. Our relationship would never be what it once was, but at least we were communicating, truly communicating for the first time in years. Emma continued therapy with Dr. Chun, making remarkable progress over the months. Children are resilient in ways adults often forget. She still had nightmares occasionally, but they became less frequent. She never asked to see her grandmother, which broke my heart, but also relieved me. She was learning that family didn't mean accepting abuse. After 18 months of weekly sessions, Dr. Chun reduced Emma's appointments to twice monthly, and eventually to monthly check-ins. Dad became a constant, loving presence in our lives. He and Carol moved closer, buying a house just 20 minutes away. Emma finally had grandparents who treated her with genuine love and respect. Watching her play in their backyard, hearing her laugh without fear, made everything worth it. Word spread quickly through our small community. I became known as the mother who'd stood up to family abuse, who'd chosen her daughter over toxic family ties. Some people admired it. Others whispered that I'd been too harsh, that family deserved forgiveness. I learned to ignore the latter group. I also discovered an unexpected community of survivors. Other mothers reached out, sharing their own stories of family violence and the crushing guilt they carried for not protecting their children sooner. I started a support group that met monthly. We created a safe space to share experiences, resources, and healing strategies. The first meeting had 5 women. By the 6th month, we had 20 regulars. They came from all walks of life: lawyers, teachers, cashiers, stay-at-home moms. What united us was the shared experience of discovering that family members we trusted had harmed our children, and the aftermath of choosing our kids over superficial family loyalty. One woman, Jennifer, described how her father had disciplined her son by locking him in a closet for hours. When she confronted him, her entire extended family turned on her, accusing her of being vindictive and trying to destroy the family patriarch over old-fashioned parenting. She pressed charges anyway and lost relationships with 17 relatives. "But my son is safe now," she said during our 3rd meeting, her voice strong. "He doesn't have panic attacks anymore. He's sleeping through the night." And I look at these people who chose defending an abuser over protecting a 7-year-old, and I realize they were never my family at all. Another mother, Patricia, shared how her mother-in-law had been slowly poisoning her daughter with excessive medication. The woman had convinced everyone the child had serious health problems, requiring constant intervention. It took Patricia 2 years to realize her healthy daughter was being made sick deliberately. The diagnosis? Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The hardest part wasn't even the betrayal, Patricia told us. It was that my husband initially took his mother's side. He couldn't believe his mom would hurt anyone. It nearly destroyed our marriage. We're in intensive couples therapy now, and he's finally seeing what happened. But that period where he chose defending his mother over believing me about our daughter's suffering, I don't know if we'll ever fully recover from that. These stories reinforce my own choices. I heard variations of my experience reflected back. The favoritism between grandchildren, the explosive anger over minor incidents, the family members who valued reputation over child safety. We shared legal resources, therapist recommendations, and coping strategies. One woman told me, "You gave us permission to stop accepting abuse as normal. Watching you press charges against your own mother showed us we could hold family accountable." About 8 months after the trial, I received a letter from my mother. It came from the prison, addressed in her distinctive handwriting. I debated whether to open it. Dad advised me to read it with my therapist present, so I did. The letter was 4 pages long. Most of it was self-pitying, complaining about prison conditions and how unfair her sentence was. She blamed stress from the party preparations. She blamed Emma for being difficult. She blamed me for overreacting. Nowhere did she actually apologize or take responsibility. The last paragraph said, "When I get out, I expect you to bring Emma to visit. She's my granddaughter and she needs to learn to respect her elders. What happened was unfortunate, but family forgives. I hope you've learned something from all this drama you created." I read those words 3 times, each time feeling more resolved in my decisions. My therapist watched my face carefully. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I answered honestly, a profound sense of lightness washing over me. I spent my whole life trying to earn her approval. I made excuses for her behavior, normalized her cruelty, accepted the favoritism. Reading this letter confirms she hasn't changed at all. She never will. And I'm completely at peace with never speaking to her again. I burned that letter in my fireplace that night. Emma watched the paper curl and blacken, not understanding the significance, but enjoying the ritual of the fire. We made hot chocolate and watched a movie. It was perfect. Mom served 18 months before being released on parole. I heard about it through Diane, who still kept minimal tabs on her. Apparently, Mom had been a difficult inmate, constantly fighting with other prisoners and guards. Her anger management courses hadn't helped. She tried contacting me immediately after release: letters, phone calls to my work, messages through extended family. I documented everything and reported the violations to her parole officer. Each contact violated the terms of the restraining order, which had been extended as part of her sentencing conditions. After the 3rd post-release violation, she was hauled back to court. The judge extended her probation and added electronic monitoring to ensure she stayed away from us. The last time I heard anything substantial about her was roughly 3.5 years after the initial incident. Aunt Sandra mentioned that Mom had moved to Arizona to live near a distant cousin, leaving behind the community that had rejected her. Good riddance. Emma is 7 now, thriving in 2nd grade. She's in therapy just once a month with Dr. Chan, down from the weekly sessions we started with years ago. She talks about the incident occasionally, processing it in age-appropriate ways. Her therapist says she's doing remarkably well, largely because I believed her, protected her, and ensured consequences for her abuser. She has a close relationship with Dad and Carol, who she calls Grandpa Mike and Nana. They attend her school events, have special grandparent-grandchild outings, and show her what healthy family relationships look like. She talks about them constantly, their kindness forming new neural pathways over the trauma. Madison is doing okay too, now 8 years old herself. Diane and I have rebuilt a cautious relationship. Our daughters play together sometimes, supervised carefully. Madison asked once why they don't visit the other grandma anymore. Diane handled it well, explaining simply that Grandma made bad choices and it wasn't safe to visit her. My relationship with Diane will never be completely restored. Too much happened. Too many years of her benefiting from Mom's favoritism, while I was criticized and dismissed. But we're cordial. We attend family events together. We're working on it. As for me, I learned that protecting your child means being willing to destroy relationships that don't serve them. It means pressing charges against your own mother if necessary. It means enduring judgment from people who value family loyalty over child safety. It means standing firm when everyone tells you you're overreacting. People still ask if I regret how hard I came down on my mother. The answer is always no. She nearly killed my daughter over a cake. She showed no remorse, took no accountability, and learned nothing from her actions. She deserved every consequence she faced. Emma deserved protection, justice, and healing. She got all 3 because I chose her well-being over toxic family peace. Every time I see her laughing, playing, trusting the world again, I know I made the right choice. The support group I started now has 40 regular members. We meet twice monthly, sharing resources about breaking cycles of family violence. Several members have pressed charges against their own relatives. Others have simply gone no contact, choosing peace over obligation. We celebrate these victories together, understanding the immense courage it takes to prioritize children over adult comfort. The group started with 5 women, grew to 20 regulars by the 6th month, and continued expanding as word spread through therapist networks and family court advocacy groups. I've become an advocate in ways I never expected. I speak at schools about recognizing child abuse. I've worked with lawmakers on grandparent rights legislation, ensuring abusive relatives can't use the courts to force contact with children they've harmed. I've turned my pain into purpose. Sometimes I think about the woman I was before that terrible day. The one who accepted crumbs of approval from a mother who didn't deserve her devotion. The one who made excuses for favoritism. Who convinced herself Emma didn't notice being treated as lesser. I'm grateful she found the strength to evolve. Emma asks sometimes why we don't see grandma, like her friends see their grandmas. I tell her the truth in age-appropriate ways. That grandma made a bad choice and hurt her. Bad adults who hurt children lose the privilege of being in their lives. That love shouldn't include pain. She seems to understand in her own way. She has nightmares less now, maybe once every few months. When she wakes up scared, I hold her and remind her she's safe. That grandma can't hurt her anymore. That mommy made sure of it. She falls back asleep quickly, trusting in my protection. Dad told me once that standing up to my mother was the bravest thing he'd ever seen. I couldn't do it, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I ran away instead. But you stayed and fought. You protected Emma in ways I never protected you. I'm so proud of you, honey. His words meant more than he knew. I'd spent my childhood craving my mother's approval, never quite measuring up. Now I had my father's respect, earned through courage rather than compliance. Felt infinitely better. The legal fees were substantial, but the settlement covered most of them. The emotional cost was higher. I lost extended family who sided with my mother, who believed her version where Emma was a difficult child who provoked her grandmother's righteous anger. But I'm okay with those losses. The people who matter stuck around: Dad and Carol, Diane working on herself, my friend Rachel who brought meals when I was too stressed to cook, my coworkers who covered shifts when I had court dates, Patrick, my lawyer, who believed my daughter deserved justice. These are my real family. Emma's teacher mentioned last week that she's one of the kindest children in class. She helps classmates who struggle, shares her snacks, and stands up for kids being bullied. I asked where she learned that, and Emma said simply, "You showed me, Mommy. You protected me when I needed it. So I protect other kids too." My 4-year-old daughter stuck her finger in a cake. A normal childhood impulse, curious and innocent. My mother responded with violence that could have killed her. The aftermath destroyed a family, sent a woman to prison, cost me relationships, and changed the trajectory of multiple lives. But it also freed us. Emma learned abuse isn't acceptable. I learned that protecting children matters more than family peace. Diane learned that being the favorite doesn't make you safe from toxic systems. Dad learned he could be brave even if it came decades late. Some family members still send messages occasionally, suggesting enough time has passed for reconciliation. They forward pictures of Mom looking elderly and frail, trying to trigger guilt. I delete them without responding. Abusers age too, but that doesn't erase their actions or entitle them to access their victims. Emma will be 8 in 3 months. We're planning a birthday party at the park. Nothing fancy. Just her friends from school, simple decorations, and a store-bought cake because I'm not much of a baker. She's excited about the bounce house we're renting. No drama. No walking on eggshells. No wondering if Grandma will explode over minor imperfections. Just a little girl celebrating another year of life surrounded by people who love her safely. And whenever I doubt whether destroying those family relationships was worth it, I look at my daughter's smile and remember her tiny body motionless on the floor. I remember thinking I'd lost her. I remember the fury that consumed me. The determination that my mother would never hurt her again. I kept that promise. She's safe now. We both are. The family I broke needed to be broken. From its ruins we built something better. Smaller maybe, but infinitely healthier. A family where children are protected, where abuse has consequences, where love doesn't include violence. That's worth every burnt bridge, every ended relationship, every judgmental whisper in the grocery store. My daughter knows she matters more than cake, more than parties, more than adult egos. She knows I'll always choose her safety over convenient peace. And she's learning to make those same choices for herself, to set boundaries, to recognize that family titles don't excuse harmful behavior, to understand that real love protects rather than harms. My mother spent her entire adult life wielding her temper as a weapon, facing minimal consequences because family always made excuses. Until the day she hurt someone who had a mother willing to fight back with every resource available. She left them all begging for mercy. My mother, my sister, the relatives who enabled this pattern, not through violence or revenge, but through accountability, through the legal system, public exposure, and the permanent loss of relationships they'd taken for granted. The mercy I show now is for Emma and children like her. Mercy means protecting them from people who view them as objects to control rather than humans to cherish. It means burning down toxic family structures so healthy ones can grow. People say blood is thicker than water, but they forget the full quote. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family we choose, the promises we make to protect the vulnerable, matter more than genetic connections. I chose Emma every single time, and I'd make the same choice infinity times over. Consequences be damned. She's sleeping peacefully in her room right now, her rabbit tucked under one arm. No nightmares tonight. Just a little girl dreaming of bounce houses and birthday cake. Secure in the knowledge that mommy keeps her safe. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between your child's safety and toxic family loyalty? Tell me what you think, I really want to know. Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below.